boy Itchin Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of AD or Alpha Dean. We have Spigs18. And Dean, what are we doing here today?
Well, tonight is all about the option of optional rules. We're basically going to look at the CSR. Optional rules, in my opinion, is a loaded statement when it comes to Cypher System anyway because of the modular nature. So everything's an option. But they do have some things outside of the normal rule set that we can consider options. So tonight we're going to look at those things specifically labeled as optional rules, but only what's in the CSR because we didn't want to open up a can of worms that we were unprepared for and be online for 3 hours talking to people. So, without further ado, Anthony, tell us how we're going to, handle this situation.
All right, guys. First off, what's up, everybody? For the sake of this discussion, we're going to break it down and go over all the optional rules. Like Dean said, only in the CSR. Some going to be more in-depth than others, of course, due to, we're going to give our own opinion on how useful they are, how often they come up during gameplay, and the most important thing is how much do they add to the game. We know that there are many other great optional rules in other setting books, the predation companion mechanic and the Stars of Fire ship combat rules come to mind first and foremost. But for the sake, of time, we decided to concentrate only on the CSR. So we're gonna, it's just gonna make it easier for us, and also just, won't give you a headache of having to do all the notes and research.
Maybe we'll come around. Maybe we'll come back to the other books at some other time. But there may be some honorable mentions tonight too, because there is this love affair going on with certain stuff too.
So at the end of the day, I think what we want to do is we're going to go over all the optional rules that are in the CSR, and maybe with the help of the audience, we'll pick out what we think are the best. Maybe we'll rank a top 5, and we'll let the audience collaborate with us on that. And let's get started. What's the first optional rule,
Al? Firstly, before I dive into the list here, I have a quick question for you myself. I probably should have asked before we started. Are these in any particular order? Like the rules here, are they like by page number?
For the most part, I
just want to make sure like you didn't do it in any specific way. I just like to mention.
For the most part, they're just how I found them in the book because they are basically at the end of most of the genre sections, but then there are also a couple in the rules section and stuff like that. They were just where I found them. So we're gonna give the page number, and you're just going from there. You can give the page where you find the rule, and that's it.
All right, awesome.
Before you start, I got a quick question. Chat, I noticed we were actually talking before we started, right before we went on air. Me and Al both admitted to some of these rules we didn't even remember were in the CSR till we started writing them down. So I'm just curious, how many of these rules from chat as we're talking about them have you actually used?
Or remembered or knew about. Or if it's completely new, or if you didn't hear about it, or I have completely wiped, or not in your memory, mention it. But either way, because this first one right off the bat is one I completely forgot about, or maybe never even read or something. But we're starting with the optional rule of choosing a combat effect ahead of time, and that's found on page 212 of the Cypher System Revised Core Book. And I'm just gonna read off the whole what the thing is, right?
Yeah, because it's not.
Yeah, it's not too long. Yeah, I just want to make sure. So while normally you get a minor or major effect based on your die roll, sometimes a character in combat tries to achieve a minor or major effect as part of a deliberate strategy, such as disarming a foe they don't want to harm or shooting a huge beast in the eye to blind it so they can run away. A character can choose a minor or major combat effect ahead of time so they can achieve it without rolling a natural 19 or 20 on the die, but the attack is modified in these ways. For a minor effect, you subtract 4 from your damage and the attack is hindered. For a major effect, you subtract 8 from your damage and the attack is hindered by 2 steps. In either case, if your attack would deal 0 points of damage or less, there is no damage or effect at all. So what I'm reading here is it's a pretty easy way on the fly to just say, hey, I want to impose this effect. but it seems kind of difficult if you're reducing your damage from 4 and 8 or like let's talk about this, guys. Like, how are you going to not drop to 0 when your damage is getting subtracted by that much? Using effort or like
You're gonna have to.
how,
You're gonna have to use effort. You know, you think about it this way. If it's let's just say it's a first tier character, you're gonna have to choose, are you going to, expend depending on what the attack is, you're definitely gonna have to expend effort to push the damage above 8, because let's just say you're using a heavy weapon, then you use effort that pushes the damage to 9, so you're only going to do 1 point, but you'll get your effect that you're trying to get, your major effect that you're trying to get. So you only do 1 point of damage, but you will get your major effect. And the same thing goes for that minor effect that you're trying to do. So it's a nice trade-off, because let's just say in the case, like you said here, you wanted to blind the creature to get away. You really don't care how much damage you get. You just don't want the thing to be able to see you, so y'all can get ghosts.
it's
I mean, I was gonna say this is an optional rule that I've actually used in game as a player, but not many people as a GM. I haven't had many players use it on in my games. And it's like what Dean said. Like I didn't necessarily want like any damage. I wanted a particular thing to happen.
It makes a lot of sense. I enjoy it as a concept, and also it also kind of works well. Like, even if you roll like a high number, it also adds to your damage, like 17, 18. So you do still have a good chance of still having the effect happen, even if you're using, like, let's say a medium weapon and what you call it, going for that minor effect that reduces your damage by 4, you still have a chance. And you
Right.
don't have to roll a 19 or 20, or excuse me, you don't have to roll a 19, you can roll a 17 or 18. That's pretty neat.
Yeah, and I think
Okay.
the beautiful part about it is that, once again, it's that whole narrative aspect. It's that whole, you know, uh prime example would be, if we go to Avengers, remember the first Avengers and Loki's riding on the thing and Hawkeye, zeroes in on him and poof, lets the arrow go, and he catches it. Well, guess what? I really wasn't trying to, I knew you were probably going to do that, but surprise, that kind of thing. So I think it adds to that narrative that you can actually do, that the player can actually have a part of.
Mr. Fizzer said something that actually makes a lot of sense. This really excels with certain foci, like needs no weapons to emulate martial arts. If you wasn't running a full martial arts and didn't have like mechanics based on that, it'll be a good optional rule to use. That one guy that wants to play the Hong Kong Fooey type.
Right.
What I mean? He could actually utilize this optional rule.
I personally have never used it, so I can't really say how it is in practice. But it seems like, again, an interesting way to enhance the narrative. Though, what you call it, Mr. Fizzer did say it came with a caveat. Usually, it seemed like too much work. Yeah, usually, again, some players might be of the effect, like, if I'm to get an effect, it'll come from the 19 or 20, and I think I'm of that mindset too. It's like, if I'm gonna add to the narrative, RNGesus will provide it to me with that 19 and 20.
Well, I mean, it's
I have a question that doesn't seem to be answered on this. So you subtract the 8, right? But
Yeah.
how about if you roll the natural 20 anyway? Does that go out the window?
what I would do, if the person has already done it, they roll a natural 20, I'd give them another effect, because they've already spent whatever it costs. I'd give them an effect, or I would cancel out the losing damage. You roll a natural 20. So
No, but I mean, but how about if you roll a natural 20 and then you subtract the 8, they miss. Like
no,
the
no,
target number
no,
5. Like, let's just say, for
no.
example.
And the 8 is you subtract it from the damage. It's
Oh,
not.
from the damage. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
because, remember, it's hindered.
Yep.
So my thing is, if they rolled a natural 20, I just throw that whole thing out the window and just give them the effect they wanted, let them have their damage, because it is a natural 20. But the fact that they're taking the opportunity to make a called shot and take the chance, just like when you roll a 20 and you've spent effort, but you get your points back when you roll a 20. I would rule it
Actually,
that way.
that's actually a really good analogy. So that actually would be a great way to handle it. Is if they roll a 20, kind of negates what they paid to do it, and they just do their damage as usual. That's that. I mean,
Right.
that sounds logical to me.
And I just wanted to, point out that you know, that's again the nature of Cypher System. Some people do play a more narrative game, and then some people play a more combat oriented game. And my thing is, when you start getting into these optional rules, I think a lot of stuff like that does come into play. That it's kind of feeding into the narrative side of things a little bit more to give you more narrative control of what the players more narrative control of what's going on.
Yeah.
So
I really like what Brian and well, I guess Mr. Fisher agrees with him, said that it lets characters who like focus on combat, like the high damage, like they try to stack damage, it lets them have a way to do something narratively on top of what they're doing instead of just being the damage beast.
right.
Which is super cool. Yeah, you can do a little less damage. You're already doing tons of damage, and you can add some flavor or something to the narrative, and that's actually super cool.
So with that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and move into our next one. Optional rule is gaining insight on page 231. So sometimes GMs like to keep lots of mystery in their game and present the players with many unknowns. This can be fun and it's realistic. There's always some unknown factor in any situation that can creep up and cause trouble. And trouble is good because it makes things more interesting. The unknown factors are usually best portrayed as GM intrusions. However, when a master thief plans to break into a vault and steal jewels, they don't go in unless they're sure. They might know exactly what sort of alarms are going to be triggered, or rigged to the door, or what schedule the security guards follow when patrolling. This isn't guesswork. The thief knows these things for certain. That's how they came up with their break-in plans in the first place. It's what separates the master thief from the bumbling criminals. Similarly, the PCs are competent individuals and sometimes even experts, and such people can make decisions and devise plans with confidence. Yet players often find this difficult for two reasons. First, while their character might be a world-class con artist, infiltration specialist, or demolitions expert, the players are not. And second, they're hindered by all the previously mentioned unknowns. This is why PCs can gain insight to help them. If a character is thinking about a plan, doing research, gathering information, casing a job, or scouting ahead, they can spend 3 intellect points and 1 action to gain a single bit of knowledge from the GM that they can count on with certainty. Insights are also always presented as absolutes, and once established, they should never be changed, unless it's through the direct and deliberate intervention of the PCs. For example, if the PC gains an insight that giving the guards at the gate a bottle of booze by 10 p.m. ensures that the guard is drunk by midnight, and they kill that guard and a new one is stationed there, the insight is invalidated and all bets are off. Likewise, if they use a psychic power to make the guard hate alcohol, either way, it changes only because the PCs changed it deliberately. Thus, they know for certain ahead of time that the insight has become invalid. Insights are never an end in themselves. They are a means to an end. And if the whole point of the adventure is to identify a murderer, the characters can't get an insight to learn the killer's identity. They could, however, use insight to help them along. For example, they might learn that the murderer is left-handed or that the accountant is definitely not the murderer. Ultimately, the GM decides each insight's revelation. So there's no chance that the PC will gain too much information if such a thing is even possible. But GMs are highly encouraged to give a valuable insight if the character looks for one by spending intellect points and actions, even if it must be made up on the spot. Doing so allows the players to make intelligent plans and feel confident, and more important, and competent.
Yeah, first off, I really like this rule. It's I think it's very narrative dependent. You know what I mean? Like it's mystery games, maybe the occasional crime drama. I could possibly see it in a superheroes game when you're
Spy
tracking down,
thrillers.
yeah, when you're tracking down a villain. But I think this is, I think the cost is just enough and it doesn't directly like destroy the GM's narrative because you're giving them just enough to keep the story moving forward, but not like giving out the entire mystery. This is one of those optional rules that I really like, and I'm gonna start in, incorporating it more in other genres and see if I can make it work.
So there's actually an ability from a focus that's similar to this. I'm blanking on what it is. It was someone in my one play by post game that I tried to do that kind of failed pretty miserably, but it was fun. It had fun characters. One of the characters had, I think it was foretold. Oh damn! I not was foretold. Either way, it was something about like seeing the future or having insight or something. And it's basically this: he had an ability that could ask me a question about where they were going, or like a situation, and it wasn't game breaking at all to give them these like direct but vague hints, if that makes sense. And having a way for everybody to be able to do that, especially if you're playing like a mystery game or a gumshoe game or whatever, kind of like where they're trying to solve a mystery or there's a character who focuses on that. It definitely is not game breaking at all. It definitely seems like a lot of fun, and I definitely had a lot of fun with that character in my game.
There's
Travels through time.
I can't remember the name of the damn game, but
No.
there's a game that is kind of all about that. You what is it Blades in the Dark, where you have like the three different planning phases or whatever, and it's all the game is all about uh, basically doing heists and stuff. It's oh my god, what was that game? I played with Kenny.
Blazing the Dark has the clocks.
Okay, so it's not that one, but whatever it is, it was a game where everybody comes from these different type of guilds and stuff like this, and everybody you have a planning phase to how to set up your actions in
Oh,
order to.
didn't we play that game?
Yeah, yeah, we
I
played
cannot remember
together.
what it was called. It was so cool though. Oh
But yeah,
no.
doesn't it make you think about that?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know,
definitely. Yeah, yeah.
it makes me
Oh
think about
man.
that concept, which is like which is to me, which is really really cool when you think about um what it's saying. So you could actually add that element to your Cypher System game, that you actually have a planning phase and everybody involved gets some insights into whatever the job is that they're doing, especially again going back to what we were saying before, if it's a mystery, if it's a spy thriller, intrigue, anytime, or escape. If you're doing something where they got to escape, like the bad guys, killer mousetrap type deal.
But on top of that,
I mean, to
oh,
me, when I think of a successful optional rule is that it operates within the framework of the genre that it was intended, but also has applications outside that genre. And
Exactly.
I think this falls into that category as well because, like, you know, everybody played the fantasy game where the DM doesn't want to TPK you, so he captures you all, and then you're wound up in a cell without any of your weapons or equipment and stuff like that. This is a way of getting around that without being the like too easy on the players. Make them waste 3 points, and give them an insight on how to escape the dungeon.
Right.
and what you were saying, like how it has different applications. Like we're mostly talking about spy thrillers, so on and so forth. Like more like modernish type stuff. It could also be used in a magical setting or like in a mystical setting where like what you call it. There's like a seer or like a group of seers, like people who can, you know, I guess take something or have a ritual or something, and that's how they gain the insight. It has a bunch of different applications. It's a very very nice optional rule.
Absolutely, I agree.
I'm just curious how many people in chat actually use this rule.
It looks like Archer Gray uses all of them.
All right, so should we move on to the next one?
Absolutely,
Go
it's on
for
you,
it.
Ant.
All right, so the next one is getting an XP advance. We've done this without even considering it an optional rule, but by introducing a story complication based on your character's background, a player can start the game with a significant amount of XP and spend them immediately if desired, even to purchase enough benefits to advance to the next tier. The GM has final approval over this option, and it should be used only in groups that don't insist on all characters having precisely the same power levels. This story based concept allows a player to create exactly the character they want at the outset at the cost of building a narrative complication into the PC.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll go first with this. This is one of those rules that I'm not so sure about because I'm not a big fan of giving one player a benefit over everyone else. This has to be like this is definitely not a one-shot mechanic that you added with playing with strangers because you're gonna build animosity. Be like, hey, why the hell does Joanne have, why is she tier 3 and we all schlubbing around as tier 1s? You know what I mean? So I could definitely see this. This is definitely a session 0 optional rule.
Well, the way I see the use of this particular rule is kind of how we've used it in the past. That everybody gets the advanced.
Yeah.
Everybody gets the advanced XP, but it's up to you how you use that advanced XP. If you want to tier your character up, or if you want to be the guy that holds on to all your XP so you can use it in game, and again, it doesn't unbalance the game. It's just literally, everybody's own choice, and of course, like you said, it does have to have a session 0 or a conversation before you sit down at the table, so everybody's on the same sheet.
I know this isn't the optional rule, but what usually happens is when I sit down with a group and one person gives a legitimate argument on how they want to flesh out their character and they need this extra, whether it's an extra ability or, some sort of extra stat bump. What I would normally do is say, yes, you can have that, but then I'll turn around and tell everyone else in the group, hey, since this person did this,
right,
you could also get an extra
right, exactly same the same thing. Yeah, we're on the same sheet.
And I really like that concept actually. Like even if you don't plan to use that rule at all or whatever, when one person asks you about having that even in regards to this, like let's say one player wants to have that EXP advance or for having something in their backstory, you can turn around to your other player and say, hey, this player's doing this. Now I want all of you to do it. Come to me with something creative or something, and then we'll make something work for you. And that will spark creativity in the other players, and hopefully maybe even get them talking to each other. Maybe have interwoven backstories. That's some next player stuff there, right? Next level player stuff right there, I should say.
I do like the concept of a complication trade. Trading a complication for a benefit. I like that concept.
Mm-hmm.
But me personally, as a player, I usually like to take the complication for narrative purposes anyway. But I like playing around with that mechanic of taking something negative to gain an additional positive. So from a design perspective, I like the way it was designed.
I think the design of it and the fact that we're everybody. Well, I can't say everybody, but I can say with the three of us, because we dig the narrative quality of Cypher System. Anything that adds to the character of the character, becomes fun, and is useful. So, to get something back for it, maybe another ability or some extra XP to offset something during the game is win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, it's just nice to see something that sparks that creativity amongst the player base.
And
so go ahead, Al.
I was going to say this is one of the optional rules that it spans across every genre. So it's a universal optional rule. Like it doesn't need to be based on any one genre, which is also a positive.
Yep, always nice. As is our next one, basically. So the next optional rule here, pretty simple one. It's the optional rule of using miniatures, which is found on page 235 of the CSR. It states some players like to use miniatures, counters, or other tokens to represent their characters, particularly in a battlefield situation. Miniatures showing the location of the PCs, NPCs, and terrain features can be useful visual aids. They help people see who is closest to the door, which foe stands where, and who will be crushed if dangerously weak part of the ceiling caves in. Again,
I'll take this one first.
Hold on a second. Before you even go forward, they also had an extensive list of different ways of using miniatures that I didn't copy and paste because it was like a page long. But you know, they basically explain how the distance works, how the combat works with miniatures, you know, how the damage ranges work with miniatures. I'm not a big miniatures guy, so I didn't want to copy and paste.
Well, you didn't have to. I mean, the reason why I said I would go first because I use it, especially like at conventions and stuff, and I love it because having that additional visual aid for players helps them get into Cypher System itself and understand the narrative quality. You know, by having, you know, an immediate range band and you can actually put it on a piece of paper. Now they have a visual, you know, or putting it on the table, you know, and you have terrain and stuff. And I've done it, you know, with a lot of different Cypher System games I've run. I actually think it's really cool because it's easier than, you know, like using D&D or something like that, because I don't need a ruler. I don't have to, you know, my immediate range band is the square right outside, right next to everybody. And then, you know.
Here's where the conversation gets interesting because I'm going to declare a big on that one because the minute you put out a battle map, the creativity, the narrative creativity in the Cypher game gets thrown out the window. And from personal experience,
maybe your games,
the guys' minds go straight to a tactical, how do I win at this count? I'm not a big fan of battle mats for Cypher System. I'm a fan of putting out an image. I'm just not a fan of battle mats.
Again, like I said, it's for your games, and it's really how you approach it. And I think everybody has a different methodology. And like I said, I don't just put out a battle map. I like to use terrains and stuff like that. So it is a full-on visual.
Yeah, but
you know, but again, it's worked for me. Not saying it doesn't work for everybody.
The optional rule that's in the book about using miniatures, it's about making it tactical. That's what the rule's about. So
understood. I get that. But what I'm trying to say is I've done both and it works. It's worked for me at my table. And I just say that I quantified it. It's my table. I don't know about nobody else's.
On my table. So.
There you go.
All right, and let me just interject here real fast as a level-headed neutral party. so for me, neutral, huh? So for me, I do use them in a way. Not again. I honestly knew that they mentioned miniatures in the CSR. I didn't know that they had very specific rules on how to use them. I didn't know that because I didn't read that section, obviously, because I'm not super big on miniatures. But I do like to use them, not in a super specific fashion such as that. Early on in the Cipher Unlimited's Discord creation, we were having a discussion about battle maps or just battles in general. And I forget who brought it up. Oh man, it's one of the old heads. It was like Tattered King or I forget the other guy's name. But either way, they mentioned they do their battle maps in like general area battle maps, kind of like I think they said they stole it from Fate or something. I forget what it's from. So I've basically co-opted that idea as well. So basically I'll set up a battle map, quote unquote, with like 9 or 12 or however big I want it, general area circles. And each circle is like an immediate distance, and then to move a circle is an immediate distance, so on and so forth. It's very basic, like super easy. And I feel like that hasn't, like, I feel like your complaint is very valid, Anthony, where like people get of a tactical mindset. But I feel like with a looser set, the way I've started to do it or the way I've been taught to do it, the creativity is still not stifled, and people just use it more of a basis on who is where when the stuff they're trying to do is happening.
I think let me rephrase my point because I think I don't have a problem with maps. If anybody who's played with me knows that I use images more than the both of your guys combined when it comes to running the game.
100%
online, yeah.
I don't have a problem. The problem I have is with the grid, with the now we're doing distances, we're doing,
Yes.
like I, I like it, a narrative game to stay narrative. I don't want to, and I enjoy Battle Map Pathfinder D&D. I enjoy that gameplay, but for those games, this is one of those things that I have no problems breaking out a map when people need clarification or they need to visualize the way a scene looks. I have no problems dropping a map down to show them, hey, look, this is the house, this is the hill, this is the this. I just don't want them to say, okay, now I'm moving, going into the Monopoly stage, I'm moving 4 squares.
Hard to agree on that.
Well, again,
Yeah.
like I said, and again, I think it's really in how it's delivered in the approach. I have my method, and it has worked, and it has worked for me to get people who never played Cypher System. It's worked for me to get them to understand the whole concept of uh immediate, short, and long ranges, and the whole nine.
Well, you
But
wait,
I
wait,
think
wait.
it's an approach. That's all.
You've done that with Cypher System with a gridded battle map, like actual using squares and
Yep.
like what?
Yep.
What? Wait, I gotta take a what?
It wasn't. Again, like I said, it's literally.
No,
I really think
I
it's
get
how
it.
you
I'm
approach.
just exaggerating.
Yeah.
It still sounds kind of weird to me, but I get it. It definitely helps newer players, especially players coming from that D&D side. But
And
yeah,
infinite construct, yes.
I still have to raise my glasses and what?
But infinite construct, I just agree. I do use hexes, not the squares, but yeah,
Okay,
still the same
actually,
thing.
same
It is,
concept though.
but it's the same thing.
But it's an optional rule that's there. It has and it hits our criteria. It has multiple uses, is multiple genres. Just not for me personally.
As
So
written in the book, yeah, not for me personally. As I described earlier, yeah, I enjoy that.
right. So moving on, our
It seems
optional
like it's
rule next
in
is
chat
skills
though.
for backgrounds,
Wait,
which is page 235 of the CSR. Um, a warrior background says that they worked in a smithy as a child, but there's no way a warrior can begin with weaponsmithing as a skill. They can get this skill as they progress. Should they start with that skill? This question has 4 potential answers. Number one, no. They might know the basics of the task. However, a skill doesn't represent simple familiarity, but extensive training, experience, or talent. Not everyone knows who works in a restaurant is a chef. Not everyone who works in a restaurant is a chef. 2, sure. In the scope of things, well, weaponsmithing wreck the game or make a character unplayable. Is it unfair to the other players? Probably not. For that matter, the GM could give all the characters um, background skills that require that it ties into the character's background and doesn't have a lot of direct adventure and application. For example, a PC can have cooking, animal care, philosophy, and woodworking, but not climbing, sneaking, or anything similar, and certainly not a skill with attack or defense. Number 3, yes, use the optional rules given for experience point advances, where the character takes on a story complication in exchange for receiving 4 XP to buy a new skill. 4 XP is the normal cost to buy a new skill as a character advancement. Number 4, yes, allow the player to have an XP deficit. The character starts with the desired skill, but before they can gain any of the 4 benefits required to advance to the next tier, they must pay off this deficit. It's probably unwise to allow a character to start with a deficit greater than 4 XP.
So yeah, super straightforward, easy optional rule. I think a lot of us use it even before reading about it. It's just like it makes sense. Like, hey, the blacksmith character. Oh, he's gonna have blacksmithing, obviously. But what you call it? It's how I handle it is how it specifies in I think 2. No, yeah, 2. Yeah, in scope of things, sure, they can have it as long as all the other players have the option to take a new skill as well based on their backstory. I'm all about that. As long as everyone has access to the same extra options, we can keep on adding options. Again, as long as every single player at the table has access to adding those options as well. Yeah.
I mean, you done now?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. like I've seen in chat, we do a lot of one shots where we do like pre-generated characters that are basically based on a profession, and like the butcher is gonna get recognizing meat cuts or whatever as a free skill. Well, I don't think it's worth 4 XP doing so. So, like I seen in chat, people said, "Oh, if it's a skill from a profession, they usually give them one for free." Now, if someone is saying, "I'm a soldier and I want, grenades or something like that," then maybe I'll consider charging 4 XP for something that has, multiple benefits. But if it's a niche ability, like tailoring, like or dry cleaning,
Flute
you know what I mean?
playing.
Yeah, I don't think that it's worthy of a 4 XP cost. And pretty much like what we said about the other optional skill, this is something that we should allow all the players the option of using. So it's
Well,
definitely skills for backgrounds is definitely something that's not game breaking if you did charge them 4 XP for. So
I think it kind of addresses just that what you just said, Anthony, because it says yes, but use the option for giving XP cost if it takes on story complications in exchange for using the 4 XP. So in other words, if it's something that's going to affect the game, because like I said, if it's attack or defense or sneaking, climbing, those are mechanical things that is going to affect the game. But the guy having some knowledge and philosophy, or like you said, special cuts on the meat, that's not game breaking, and I have no issue with that. So I think I agree in that respect that the 4 XP is only going to be charged, or the deficit is only going to be put in place if it's something that's going to affect the mechanical aspects of what they're doing inside the game.
now I want to run a mystery game where the killer's a butcher that hides his clues in different cuts of meat.
Oh my
So you
god.
on the site figuring out what particular meat cut it is, or
Bruh.
have somebody in the party that's a skilled butcher.
Soylent Green.
Oh no.
It's made
Oh.
out of people.
All right,
Look,
go ahead.
no, I was just saying that honestly, I think the easiest way to handle this one is just give everyone the option to have a skill from their
Right.
backstory. No XP deficit, no nothing. Again, under the same caveat that they mentioned in the rules that no obvious combat or mechanical strong skills, like flavorful stuff. I think that easily can just be applied to everyone in your group with no issues. Just don't even adding the exp deficit or exp advance or whatever at all adds a little more complication and like unevenness in the party. Just give everybody one skill.
That's the beauty of the optional plug and play optional skill. The way Cypher System is designed is that you could take it or leave it with any of these optional skills, but they do solve problems. So if you have a specific problem or a problem player that has to have something, there's always these little optional rules that you could plug in and either give it to
Exactly.
the entire group or just satisfy that one person.
Exactly.
Yep.
All right, so it's on you, Ant.
All right. This is one that's I think people have love and hate for, but it's spell casting on page 259 of the CSR. Fantasy settings prioritize magic as an essential ingredient. That's right. But why restrict that magic to just wizards or similar characters? It's not uncommon in fantasy literature for the thief or warrior to learn a few spells as they steal or brawl through their adventures. Lieber's Grey Mousers knew some spells. More Cook's Eldrick knew a lot. Pretty much any of Pierce Anthony's Xanax books knew at least one, and so on. Of course, wizards and sorcerers specialize in spellcasting, which gives them clear superiority in magic use. But whether a character is a fireball flinging wizard or beleaguered barbarian, anyone can learn some spellcasting under this optional rule. Under the spellcasting rule, any character, no matter their role or type, can choose to learn a spell as a long-term benefit. After they learn one spell, they may learn more later if they wish, or just stick to this one. Any character can gain a spell by spending 3 XP and working with the GM to come up with an in-game story of how the PC learned it. Maybe they learned it as a child from their parents or practiced it enough to actually do it. Perhaps they spent a month hiding in a wizard's library reading. It could be that they found a weird magical amulet that embows them with the
Imbues.
with the use of the spell, and so on. Next, choose one low tier ability in Chapter 9. If the GM agrees it's appropriate, the character gains that ability as a spell with a few caveats. This spell can't be used like a normal ability gained through a PC type of focus. Instead, a character must either use a recovery roll, spend many minutes or longer evoking their spell in addition to paying its pool cost. Using a recovery roll to cast the spell, if the character uses one action, 10-minute or 1 hour recovery roll as part of the same action to cast the spell, including paying any pool point cost. They can use the ability as an action. This represents a significant mental or physical drain on the character because the normal benefit of recovery points in a pool is not gained. Spending time to cast a spell, if the character takes at least 10 minutes chanting, mumbling, or quote words, concentrating deeply, or otherwise using all their actions, they can cast a low tier spell. If they also pay any pool point cost. Hours required to cast mid tier spells, 10 hours are required to cast high tier spells. I'm going to declare on this one too.
I agree. I like the premise behind it, but it feels like in execution, there's just too much lost. You know what I mean? Like a whole recovery roll, like that's kind of rough.
All I'm gonna say is I created a magic system with spell casting, so I don't need it at all.
Oh,
But
hey.
as far as this is concerned, let me just address what it's saying. What it's saying, I get it, and it made sense. And I actually did use some of this concept to help flesh out what I created. And that's kind of where it came from because I liked some of it, didn't like some of it. 10 hours required to cast a high tier spell. So it's not even a spell, it's ritual magic, when you start putting those time frames on it and stuff. So it's not even worth it.
To be honest, if you spending a resource like XP, right, then they should have just raised the XP cost and allowed them to just have the ability. Maybe raise it to 6 points or something like that.
Right.
Because,
There's a lot of methods that could be done. Like I said, it just I think it wasn't, like I said, I look at it more as ritual casting than it is a spell casting ability.
yeah, like it doesn't give the feel of what you want.
Right.
I think it's jumping through too many hoops to be able to do an ability once per session. Essentially, that's what it is. You know what I mean?
That's actually a super valid point.
Yeah.
And these, like, again, I get the thematic sense they were going for. It's supposed to be a big strain on the body, blah blah blah. But what you call it, the players who are wanting these magic elements are gonna want to be using them more than once a session. Like,
Right.
Not only that, you wasted 3 XP and you wasted 3 XP to gain the ability, right? And then you wasting a recovery roll. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, you got to use a recovery roll every time you want to use it. I think,
so
that's
they charged you twice.
it's definitely a rough mechanic.
I'll be sending an angry email about how my
well,
package.
you know what it is. Like I said, I just think it was. I think it was, a quick process, and I think they're going to address it even more so when we get here to the next optional rule.
Oh, I mean, hold on. Before you go forward, we should definitely state this that they even knew that this needed to be addressed because they mentioned about addressing it and told us. They mentioned about multiple people mentioned about reworking some of the spell casting. So I think my was warranted because they saw it.
Oh boy.
So, wizards and the optional spellcasting rule, page 260 of CSR. Wizards, usually adepts and characters with explicit spellcasting foci like master spells, channels divine blessings, speaks for the land, and possibly others are all considered to be spellcasters and moreover specialized ones. Their spells that slash abilities provided by their type of focus are used simply by paying their pool calls. Extra time or physical effort isn't required to cast it. That's because, in the parlance of the fantasy genre, these spells are considered to be prepared, but specialized casters can also use the optional spellcasting rule to expand their magic further. They can learn additional spells via the optional spellcasting rule, just as other characters with the same limitations. Optionally, specialized casters who record their arcane knowledge in a spell book or something similar gain one additional benefit. The spell book is a compilation of spells, formulas, and notes that grant the specialized caster more flexibility than those who simply learned a spell or two. With a spell book, a PC can replace up to 3 prepared spells with 3 other spells they've learned of the same tier. To do so, they must spend at least 1 uninterrupted hour studying the spell book. Usually, this is something that requires a fresh mind and must be done soon after a 10-hour recovery. For instance, if a wizard exchanges ward with an ability gained from their type, with telekinesis, an ability gained from an optional spellcasting rule, from now on, the character can cast ward only by spending time and using recovery rolls, as well as spending pool points. On the other hand, they can use telekinesis normally because now it's prepared. Later, the wizard could spend the time studying to change out their prepared spells with others they've learned using this optional spell casting rule. So it was addressed in a manner of speaking, but once again, I could see how it could be considered problematic, for a lot of people.
I think this one's a little bit better. I
Yeah.
think I think this one I can actually see, like, practical use. You're not feeling gypped, but
But the thing exactly, because if you look at Cypher System when they start talking about um, how abilities manifest. For example, when you if you picked what was it? I don't know. Just say you picked a focus that was uh, what is it? It's covered in sheen of ice. That one. Where's the sheen of ice? They said all your powers then took on a ice like properties. So your onslaught would be, a snowball or whatever, and so on and so forth. So I can see how this could, kind of be that same kind of process.
yeah, I
Oh,
mean, I don't foresee myself personally using this rule. I don't think I've ever have in a game, but I like it a little bit better than the other optional spellcasting rule. Like I
Here's my
think.
supplement.
Yeah.
what I would basically do with this, like, because I do enjoy this a lot more than the first one, is I would kind of combine the two, where it's like all players can have like a readied and then like a list of like backup spells or whatever, and I would kind of formulate how many they can hold or whatever. But either way, that's all too much work when you can just play Cipher as it is, or use Dean's magic supplement. But what you call it? I do enjoy this one a lot better though, because it goes back and addresses that one issue of having that extreme cost for your abilities, where you have these spells on deck that you can cast normally, but you still have those extra spells that you can cast in a pinch for those extra costs, which again is nice thematically for like an extreme spellcaster character of some sort. But the only issue I would see implementing something like this in, like, let's say a fantasy game, is now the mage character has a lot more stuff to play with than like let's say the barbarian or whatever, and you would have to try to work out a similar sort of system for their attacks and weapons and whatever have you. I'm sure it's doable, but then again, you're adding more work for yourself to try to like even out the playing field for your players.
Well, see, and that's one of the things that I try to address, in the supplement. But that's a whole nother thing. We kind of talked about that before, when we did our video on my supplement. But that's the whole point of it. It was to flesh it out so everybody had access to magic, and it didn't feel like somebody was being gypped over, something else. So
I think that the chat kind of agrees with us that most people don't tend to use these optional rules. But if someone does in chat, could give us some of the benefits that we might be missing from like I said, if we don't really use it much, we just basically read it and didn't agree with it. So if someone is using it, I appreciate it if you let us know some of the benefits that we might not be, we might be missing from a read through.
Yeah. But I think we can move on to the next one at this point. Yeah, so
Yep.
next one on the list, we got a pretty simple one. Handling PCs as children, and that's on page 266 of the CSR. It says the regular character creation process makes full, competent adult characters. To account for playing children, the GM should adopt this optional rule. First, the players make their characters normally, and then they apply the following adjustments to their PCs as appropriate to their age category. You might also consider applying a tier cap of 3 to childhood adventure games with kids of up to 13 years old, and a cap of tier 4 for childhood adventure games featuring PCs who are aged 14 to 17. And the adjustments are as followed. Age 9 to 13 is a slight adjustment, or excuse me, this is slight. Either way, slight. -4 to your might pool. You're vulnerable. Adults look out for you. You are trained in all pleasant social interactions with adults. You have an inability in might-based tasks. You also have an inability in tasks involving knowledge. And then the next category is age 14 to 17, youthful. You have -2 to your might pool, and you have an inability in tasks involving knowledge. Pretty straightforward optional rule. Honestly, I don't even think it's fully necessary to get the feel of playing children characters. And if you really do feel the need to like make them a little bit weaker or whatever, this would be a good way to go about doing it. But yeah, your
I
thoughts?
honestly, I honestly say that they actually fixed this rule even better. And we're talking about another book that they put out is Unmasked method of doing teenagers and stuff. I think worked really really well. And then also in Expanded Worlds, the descriptor young kind of addresses it as well. So I think this particular optional rule, I don't think I'd ever use it. I mean, it's nice if this is just what you wanted to do as a overall for your game, but I think other portions of their game, I mean, other supplements did it better.
I absolutely love this rule. I really like the way this is designed and written out. I've actually used it as a player, and I've used it with pre-gens. I like to play. I actually played a small child in a game recently, and I added the slight, because I was an 8-year-old, so I took the negative to the might pool and took the inability and might based tasks and had the adults, the asset of adults having to help me out. I think it adds flavor. It's a very narrative based rule. I, I I think this is one of the rules that hits that criteria of it could fit in any genre and setting, and it's very interesting to tackle tales from the loop style stories, kids on bikes style stories. And this gives you that option to build those modern games, Goonies, like to build those modern games and to like to give you a mechanical negative and benefit. The only problem I have with it is the useful doesn't really have a positive. I would add something like maybe fearlessness and give them an asset on all what you call
Well,
it, give them an asset on all speed defense rolls.
well,
Or
that's why I said the young descriptor did it better, and I also said that the way it's done in Unmasked is better, because like for
the
this
youngest,
one, if
the
you look at,
youngest is pretty
excuse
much
me,
word for word from Slight. I played
excuse me,
young quite a few times. It's the same exact thing.
excuse me.
The young descriptor is pretty much exactly what Slight is.
No, you get bonuses to you get a bonus to your speed. You also get um you get some other benefits. This one, I mean, of course, you do get the adults looking out for you. But like I said, but even like with Unmasked, by them giving you a baseline in all three abilities, and then only getting 3 points to add to your 3 points to add to your abilities. So I think you start out with a 6 in each ability, because here it's only giving you a -4 to might. So 9 to 13, you got a -4 to might, but you still, like, if you're playing an adept, you still got 12 points in intellect. You know what I'm saying? So it,
I just
I
like
mean,
this.
and I'm not saying anything is wrong with it.
Uh,
I'm just saying I think the other things do it a little bit better. That's all.
I
That's
think
just my opinion.
I think they added this rule to give you the option to play those kids on bikes. The like someone in chat said, the ET adventure. So I like it. I think it hits my criteria that it
Yeah.
works in multiple genres.
Yeah,
You know,
no, like I said, it works. It just
solves the
depends on how you
problem.
want to implement it.
Yep.
You know. So,
Am I the next one?
yep.
I think so.
Now we're gonna start hitting into the rules. I think get used a lot more. Or I know I think the next four are stuff that I've personally used several times. So, but I'm gonna go with the shock rule. It's on page 283 of the CSR. When the PCs encounter something shocking, many times the most realistic response is to scream, stand in horror, or run. They might be the smartest thing to do. That might be the smartest thing to do in that situation, but it's genuine. When what would your what would your accountant do if they saw an axe wielding maniac coming at them? Let's face it, unless they truly steel themselves with all their will, they'll probably scream and run. When a PC encounters something horrific, utterly disgusting, dreadful, impossible, or otherwise shocking, call for an intellect defense roll based on the level of the creature involved, or simply at an appropriate level as decided by the GM. See the shock rules table. Failure might mean that for one round, the player loses control of their character. The GM decides what the PCs do next. This usually means that the character runs, screams, gibbers, stares, slack jawed, or just does nothing. However, GM should welcome players' input into this situation. The point is to portray that when we're shocked, we don't always react in the best way, the smartest way, or even the way we want to. Fear is a powerful thing. Alternatively, failure on an intellect defense roll means that the character suffers intellect damage equal to the level of the defense task. This indicates an overall toll that numerous shocks and horrors can have on a person. You might have a situation where a character literally dies from fright. I use this a lot. I run a lot of horror games, but this also has applications well beyond horror. You could use this in sci-fi, fantasy. You could use this in so many different. You could use shock in a comedy game. You could use shock in a romance game. Like, this is one of those perfect optional rules. That, hey, do you need it? Not really. But when you do add it in, does it catch the players by surprise? Hell yes. That makes it a fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I've reflavored this rule, for gritty games, and instead of shock, it's trauma. They're hindered by it because, they've taken some heavily bodily trauma. I think we've said it 1,000 times that Cypher can, be adjusted to run just about anything. And when you start looking at the rules and the optional rules in that manner, that they are uh, flexible and multi uh, multiple applications of them, shock is a perfect one to use to get those feelings to come across. I love shock, and later on in the madness rules, actually madness and shock kind of go together. They'll refer to it. So it's one of those rules that, like Anthony said, it's probably one of those rules that come into play more often than not because it is highly applicable in multiple situations.
I will say this: unless you're running a horror, like a full psychological horror campaign or game, don't spam this rule because it can get annoying to the players if you spam it. But you know, it's one of those rules that applies to a lot of genres, and sometimes you won't even think it applies to the genre until you actually drop it on the table, and then the players realize, oh, hey, that makes sense.
Well,
You know,
that's what I'm saying, and that's what I mean. Like especially running Call of Cthulhu. I mean, if you want to run a Cthulhu style game, shock is something that you want in there right next to madness.
yeah,
But going along with what Anthony was saying, like shock can happen in any genre, literally. Like you can be shocked in any situation, in anything. So like it's awesome to throw in there. Like even if you throw like playing like a cartoony comedy game, like the characters can still be shocked by something they see. Like there's many things. I'm not gonna list examples, but yeah, it's widely applicable. So it makes it a very nice rule.
Yeah. So, and right along with shock, we move right on into the next one, which anybody who run a horror game knows how much fun this can be for a GM, and it's the horror mode. Uh, for horror games, GMs can implement a rule called horror mode. The idea is to create a feeling of escalating dread and menace by changing one die roll mechanic. In the game, things begin normal. The PCs interact with each other, and the NPCs investigate, research, travel, and so on. But when they enter the haunted house, the serial killer gets close, the elder things beneath the earth awaken, or whatever horrific situation planned by the GM begins, things change. At this point, the GM announces that the game has gone into horror mode. This is a key for the players, not the characters, to recognize that things are getting bad. It's the RPG equivalent to the spooky music beginning to play in a horror film. While in horror mode, the rules for the GM intrusion governed by the die rolls change. Normally, this happens only on a roll of one, but when horror mode starts, it becomes a roll of one or two. Then it escalates, and as time passes, the GM intrusion happens on a roll of 1 to 3, and then a roll of 1 to 4, and so on. This potentially means that a die roll in horror mode can indicate success in the task and still trigger a GM intrusion. As the intrusion's range changes with each escalation, the GM should announce this to the players. The feeling of rising tension should be dramatic and overt. On a roll of 1 to 10, half the time, things are getting dicey, and they're only going to get worse. Where the GM announces that horror mode has ended, the GM intrusions rate back down to normal, happening only on a roll of 1, or when the GM awards XP. So, yes, yes, and yes. I mean, is there anything else to say about horror mode? I love it. I've used it tons of times. And, it's just one of those things that you can't go wrong with. One thing I will say about horror mode, this might be one of the few situations I say as a GM, have yourself a list of intrusions set aside so you're ready because, in a normal game, coming up with them on the fly isn't too bad, but in horror mode, I think you might need a list. So that's just my take on it.
horror mode is so much fun. It brings so many levels of tension that you wouldn't believe. I've been on both sides of the table when the number gets to like 6 or 7, and
And
I mean, it literally, you're scared to roll the dice. You know what I mean? It adds so much to a horror game. That this is like one of those perfect mechanics for a genre. You know what I mean? It isn't so much useful in other games as much as shock is, but for a horror game, this is like one of the perfect mechanics. And this is
absolutely.
also, when that person says that wants to argue that Cypher can't be deadly, play a game of heart with a hard mode that's up to 7 or 8, and tell me that it can't be deadly when
All I'm gonna say,
multiple people are rolling horrible intrusions back.
all I'm gonna say is God doesn't love us anymore. Anthony's magnificent zombie one shot. We started the game with 5 people or 6 people. By the end of the game, only 2 people were playing the original characters they started with, because we had like 20 characters to the side. Everybody else was playing other characters, and the character list that we had of like 20 characters with 5 people playing was dwindled down to like only 3 player characters left at the end of that game. Awesome, exciting, crazy as hell. Horror mode when you're rolling 1 to 10 is freaking great. You know,
Dean's absolutely right about having a list of intrusions, because after a while, especially when you're playing with a big group and they all hitting that target horror mode number and have it escalate, it gets a little taxing on the GM.
What you call it? Andrew brings up a valid point, which is something I was gonna bring up, but he says I've used this rule in Numenera and other settings when I was looking to raise attention. It's perfect in a horror game, but it does also work when sparingly used in other settings. Like if there's a really intense moment going on, like one thing that can come to mind is like the players are disarming something that might blow up or trying to escape from a place that's about to blow up. Throwing in, you don't even have to call it horror mode, you can call it tension mode, where boom, now things are a little more rough on you because it is that tense in like that intense moment going down in the story. And that again can happen in any sort of genre or setting, not just specifically horror.
in Archer, there, I don't know if it's written down somewhere, but we actually do that all the time. There are certain things that attack the damage track. They bypass your pools, that you can do that, in of itself, because the game is built like that. So yeah, if you wanna throw something out there, just bypass the whole pool, and you know what? You fail this roll, you get hit, guess what? Boom, you're dropped down on the damage track.
You could also reverse the horror mode, use the concept for a game like Toon, and every time someone hits that intrusion area, they'll have like some Acme Toon effect happening. You know
Yep.
what I mean? So like and when it'll be the same mechanical concept, it just wouldn't be like the horrible negative. It could be like a series of funny positives or comical,
Or
scenes get added into the
or you can actually, I would actually use it so much so, like, especially if I was running like Teenagers from Outer Space, and you have that relationship with parents, that stat. Well, that's what that mode would be, your relationship with the parents. So guess what? Your parents show up at the most inopportune moments, or the phone rings and you got to get home, or you can have so much fun with the same concept. And that's the reskinability and flexibility of Cypher System at its best.
What's is Al next or me?
No,
Al,
it's me, but the next thing is basically like
Yeah, using
yeah,
GM intrusion.
it's tips for using the GM intrusion like
Yeah.
during horror mode, which again we kind of touched on, but I'll just kind of skim over this and just move directly to the next one. So basically this is a little section about using GM intrusions in horror mode states like, it's going to get difficult coming up with intrusions back to back to back to back. So you don't have to keep intruding on the players in like a very drastic way. You don't have to like make them, get attacked or whatever have you. It could be you can use it as a build up. So like for instance, on the first GM intrusion, they hear a noise in the distance. On the second GM intrusion, they hear like a scraping against the floor closer by. And then finally on the third GM intrusion, bing bang boom, the big bad shows up or whatever. It's just basically stating you can use it as a build-up mechanic instead of actually dropping like what we would call GM intrusions, like actual mechanical or deficit things or positives or whatever have you. You can use it as a build-up thing too.
Yeah,
or
just like a series of steps to.
yeah, I mean, it's like Al, like when you did your Killer in the Woods, adventure. This would be a perfect example. You know what? They're running from the killer. And you know, instead of it being something major, you know what? It's the typical thing that happens in the movie. You trip over a branch, you know, got to scramble back up to your feet. Oh my God, he's closer. You know, the
Exactly.
lights flash. You know, he's gone. You know, you could do those kind of intrusions, which would, you know, up the ante and the tension as well. You
Most
know,
definitely. But yeah,
so
oh,
oh,
sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I'm gonna just move right on to the next actual optional rule of madness.
Sweet.
Yeah, so that madness found on page 284 of the CSR. Having characters descend into madness is an interesting facet of some kinds of horror and can make long-term horror campaigns more interesting. The easiest way to portray blows to a character's sanity is through intellect damage. When PCs encounter something shocking as described above, they always take intellect damage. If they would normally move one step down the damage track due to the damage, they instead immediately regain points, like a recovery roll in their intellect pool, but lose one maximum point from that pool. Characters whose intellect pools reach 0 go insane. They lose their current descriptor and adopt the mad descriptor. They regain 1d6 plus their tier points to their intellect pools and gain back plus 1 to their intellect edge. If they ever reach a permanent intellect pool of 0 again, they go stark raving mad and are no longer playable. Intellect Edge offers an interesting means to portray a character who is knowledgeable and perhaps even powerful in terms of mental abilities, yet mentally fragile. A character with a low intellect pool but a high intellect edge can perform intellect actions well since edge is very helpful, but is still vulnerable to intellect damage where edge is of no help. Since Cypher System games are meant to be story based, players should recognize that the degrading sanity of their character is part of the story. A player who feels that their character is going mad can talk to the GM and the two of them can work out a means to portray that, perhaps by using a mad descriptor, permanently trading up to 4 points from their intellect pool to gain 1 to their intellect edge, or anything else that seems appropriate. Mental disorders, mania, psychopathy, schizophrenia, or simple phobias can be added to a character's traits, but they don't need to be quantified in game statistics or die rolls. They're simply part of the character. Inabilities in personal interactions or any area requiring focus might be appropriate, perhaps allowing the PC to gain training in weird lore or forbidden knowledge. Or maybe the opposite is true. As the character's mind slowly slips away, they become oddly compelled or can obsessively focus on a single task for indefinite periods, and thus they gain training in that topic or skill. These kinds of changes could be balanced with inabilities such as being unable to remember important details. As another way to represent madness, the GM could hinder intellect based tasks that would be considered routine, such as remembering your friends and family, or caring what happens to your best friend, or stopping yourself from injecting mysterious substance into your veins. These routine tasks normally have a difficulty of 0, but for a PC who has lost their mind, they might have a difficulty of 1, 2, or even higher. Now the character must make rolls to do even the most simple things in terms of those stats and rolls. Yeah, this is an awesome one to use in a game like Call of Cthulhu style, like any Lovecraftian style horror game. This is definitely a rule you want to be using.
It is a awesome rule. I actually played a character who had the mad descriptor, and I didn't know that the game I was playing they were going to be using madness, and it actually was kind of interesting because one of the abilities my character ended up with was that I could understand the language of God or gods, you know, the elder gods, and it was kind of cool. So I did have intellect edge, so I kind of had a buffer to make when I had to make other madness rolls, but they were always hindered, you know, which was kind of crazy. So I was always using intellect edge, you know, and spending intellect points to, you know, keep from going over the deep end, you know. It's a lot of fun. It's a great optional rule to have in your game.
I don't have much experience with the madness rule, but I remember the first time reading it, it was a little murky. Like I had to read it 2 or 3 times to fully get the grasp of what the rule really entailed. So it kind of threw me off a little bit. But now that I understand it, I definitely would like to either play it or GM using it. But I really don't have much experience with it.
I mean, I haven't used it personally, but reading it, it made a lot of sense, and I do want to use it when I do have I've written down like a little story for like a
And
Lovecraftian type game, but yeah, I definitely want to use it for that.
yeah, and this was also another one that I kind of reskinned for a gritty game I was running. Like I told you, I used shock for trauma. Madness became fatigue, and it was, where you had to regain. You were basically at a deficit, kind of the same way, and until you weren't fatigued anymore, you couldn't gain back your full pools. It was, it like I said, these things become real useful and really easy to reskin when you're trying to plug in certain types of ideas. Because I was running a Mad Max game, and it was freaking awesome. It worked out really good, to replicate, when you get uh, left out in the desert and all of this, so you're fatigued and so on and so forth. So yeah, this is one of those rules that I think is really good to use or reskin for something else.
Yeah, I definitely want to give it a shot. I just don't have much experience with it, and it seems like it's one of those rules that can have multiple effects, can be reskinned for multiple games. So it hits all our criteria as a good optional rule. It doesn't seem like it would break any game, even a Cthulhu game. So I think it's needed in a Cthulhu game. Let me correct myself. You
Exactly.
know,
Quite
but
honestly.
but other than that, I think it hits all our criteria that it's a good optional rule. So now we're gonna go to infatuation. It's on page 287 of the CSR. When a PC is near someone they're infatuated with,
Mine.
that's yours.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You want to read it?
Yeah, I'll read it. It's infatuation, page 287, like Anthony said. When a PC is near someone they're infatuated with, particularly in early stages of infatuation, they must make an intellect defense roll with a difficulty determined by the GM based on the situation, not on the level of the subject of the infatuation. Failure might mean that the character does or says something awkward or embarrassing, either in an attempt to impress or when trying to hide the infatuation. Or it could mean that for one round, the player loses control of the character and the GM decides what the PC does next, such as risk their own safety to help an endangered character. However, GM should welcome player input into the situation. The point is to portray that when we're distracted by powerful feelings and, in parentheses, hormones related to infatuation, we don't always react the best way, the smartest way, or even the way we want to. Infatuation can happen whether the PC is attracted to an NPC or a PC. So I can say that this rule I have never used. Um, Even though I did run uh, a rom-com game, I did not have this rule in the game. I don't know. I mean, it seems like it would work, and I probably should try it out, but I've never used it, so I don't have a lot to say on it.
I This is one of the rules I think is beautifully designed. I like this rule, but I think it's when you deal with like heavy gore and romantic situations, intimacy, it's very difficult to unless you have 100% buy-in from the entire table. This could be one of those very triggering rules that might create more problem than it's worth unless you have a discussion beforehand. I love the design of the rule. I think this is you know, this is a rule that I definitely want to implement at a table, but this is a session zero discussion for sure.
And
Well,
oh,
go ahead, Al.
no, I was gonna say it doesn't seem like it would like this is like we were touching on whether things can like go across multiple genres. There's not too many that this makes sense in. Like you like reflavor it for other things like I can't think of any right now, but like in a rom com it would be like perfect, like a romantic comedy, like I see it fitting perfectly. But beyond that, I'm grasping at straws.
I could see it in supers. Supers has like you always get the superhero connection that Sue Richards, Ree Richards. I could see it in you see it in the horror movies, to be honest. you know, you especially the slasher films, you always have the couple, you know, you know, I could see it happening, you know, like it,
Again, I mean,
It's
I think it
true.
could be plugged. I think it could be plugged in anywhere, like you're saying. And I
yeah.
just think you said the magic words. It would have to be a total table buy-in.
Yes.
Number one, and then number two, I think it would take a very interesting mix of people. Like I said, I ran a rom com. I ran my version of Love Potion number 9, and um, you know, when you read the next rule, I used that rule in the game, but infatuation never came in, even though it could have been, you know, it could have been used. But again, I think it's one of those rules that can become awkward, you know, if there's not total buy-in at the table, and if the people there, you know, also don't trust each other. You know,
Hey,
I think this is something that you needs trust.
someone brought up the perfect example, Hans and Leia. This is a rule that I think this hits all genres.
Yeah.
You know, Han
No, this is
Solo.
how we were talking about it.
Yeah,
Oh boy, I'm so dumb.
Yeah,
And he just says, "Yep," right away. Yep.
yeah.
Oh shit.
I mean, Hans and Leia is the perfect example.
Oh man. Oh yeah. No, it definitely can work in a lot of genres. Now that we're talking about it. The thing I think I was mostly trying to get at is what you were saying about the buy-in. Like, it has to be bought in at the table that infatuation could happen in this game that you're running. Like, it could happen in any genre, but some people at the table might be like, how can you get infatuated in a X, like whatever they want to argue for a genre? You know, there might be that one person at the table.
The problem with the whole like rule or the whole concept, right, is most players don't like to have their agency taken away. And it's one thing to have your agency taken away, like your weapons taken away, but having as a GM telling you who you will want to be intimate with is definitely something that you need to have a conversation. Or, you know, and I don't mean physical intimacy, just emotional intimacy, just period. Like,
Look,
this is definitely a consent and game informed conversation.
we've seen what happens, you know, on more than one occasion when GMs take that agency away or do something stupid, and then, you know, they get kicked off the air because you know their show gets shut down because they've done something, and you know the gaming community goes absolutely batshit crazy. So, you know, I would say don't do that even in your own private games to your players, because you don't want to lose players. You know, I mean, if you want to lose players, I say go ahead and use this rule willy nilly and, you know, have at it. You know, but if you want to keep your table happy and sane, have conversations. Be fair.
Andrew, I gotta totally disagree with that. It's not much different than shock. I think it's completely different than shock.
The only difference here is again the like mechanically wise it's very similar. The main difference here is what Anthony was saying earlier, is that there's an implication that the character has emotions for another either character or NPC. And if you're like, that would have to be discovered. You can't just on the fly be like, hey, you actually love this person, so now you have to make an infatuation. That would have to be decided beforehand or talked about. Whereas with shock rules, you can just say, hey, we're gonna use shock rules, and everyone will be like, oh yeah, okay, like, because there's not that implication of that story binding element, if that makes sense. Like, it's just a story element, whereas the infatuation
Exactly.
rules imply character connections or implied emotions.
Exactly.
Yeah, if that explanation makes sense.
And we're not saying that there's anything wrong with role playing that, because that could be very satisfying when you have a whole group buying into the story that you're trying to tell. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that you have to have those discussions beforehand.
Right. So go ahead, Ant. It's on you.
All right, so I'm now doing relationship levels, and this is on page 288. When a PC first establishes a relationship with a character, the GM should assign the relationship a level. there is no connection at all. There's no relationship level 0. Otherwise, the starting relationship is probably level 1. In certain circumstances, a relationship might start at level 2, indicating a far stronger initial connection than usual. As play progresses, the PC can attempt to improve the level of the relationship, indicating a strengthening of the bond between the two characters. The requirement to improve a relationship is twofold. First, story-based action needs to be taken. This can be dates, gifts, meaningful speech, pledge of commitment, some amount of self-sacrifice. Whenever the GM and player feels is appropriate to the story and the level of relationship. This action might require the PC to succeed a specific task with appropriate roles. For example, writing a love poem will require intellect-based tasks, while helping to retrieve a loved one's cat from a tree might require a speed-based task. Second, the player must make an intellect-based roll with the desired level of relationship as a difficulty, modified by the GM to see fit. A relationship can be improved only one level at a time, and the GM and the player should work out an appropriate time interval. For relationships of level 5 and above, multiple story-based actions and multiple roles are almost certainly required.
I mean, it's
Um,
it's
I was just gonna say this is a little less different than the first one because this one implies that the PC already is agreed to establishing a relationship. So it's telling me that the player is already given the GM agency to add a mechanical rule to the relationship. So I view this one slightly differently because I think the player is already allowing the GM to have some agency, like, hey, I want to have a relation, I want to act out a relationship with either this other player or this NPC.
um it's and just to hit on what the chat is saying, they're saying this the infinite construct, the infinite construct. I don't know, it's because it's all lowercase. Either
Infinite
way, the what they're saying is this one feels very video gamey, and Mr. Fizzer echoes that sentiment, and it does. It's a very video gamey type thing where you see it in like Stardew Valley or any like these other like dating sim type games where you build a relationship and it's codified or gamified by actual level and it unlocks things as it goes up. That I feel like this was added for people who wanted to run that sort of game in Cypher System, where they're like, this is definitely a campaign setting. You wouldn't really use this in a one shot. It doesn't really make sense to have building levels of relationship levels in a one shot. It feels like it was tailored for people trying to. Again, you can use it in literally any setting or any, genre or whatever. But it feels like it was made with the intent of mimicking those kind of games, those video games, those like the Stardew Valleys. I'm blanking on what the other like similar games are at this moment. And I know Stardew Valley is a popular one, but either way, it feels like it was meant to mimic those sort of games.
And what I'll say about this particular one is when you read it, just reading it, at the end of the day, these relationship levels don't have anything related to a benefit. If you see what it is, you just have a higher level relationship with this person. So what I used those for was actually to make, to give characters like assets when they were dealing with these people, because they had some sort of relationship. So it became, an interesting little tool used within game terms. And like Al said, very video gaming, very, very gamey in general.
Oh,
What are we playing for? Is that the goal of the game is to get a level 6 relationship with someone or something like that? So, it's not a hard rule, and it's something that can be used loose and fast depending on how you want to apply it, because you could apply it to other things as well.
You know what would be cool too if you're using this is in a non-rom-com game. You could have sets of ciphers, right? You could have the individual player cipher, and then you could have the relationship cipher. And the more levels you go up, the higher tier ciphers you get for that relationship.
Or if you, like you were saying, or you could use this same rule. Think about it. If you're playing, let's just say a fantasy game, and you go back to the same city over and over again. This could be your relationship with different merchants and people inside the city, in order for you to interact with them to get things done. You
Yep.
know, and it can be both ways. You could say you got an antagonistic level 3 relationship with somebody versus, a good natured level 3 relationship with somebody.
Mr. Fisher brought up a good point too, that you could use this rule for politics.
Yep, exactly.
There's a lot of applications. It's a really awesome rule. What you call it? It's something I do want to maybe play with if I find like the right group of players who want to play this sort of game. Where they're building relationships with NPCs maybe or even each other. Um,
I will
but
say, oh, go ahead.
no,
I'm sorry.
I was just saying like I enjoy seeing that stuff in video games where like, I just started playing this game called Star Renegades, and one of the aspects of it is building relationships between the characters, and they unlock things as you
Well,
get the
what is that other
relationship.
one you keep saying we should play? Among Us or something?
Among Us doesn't have relationship levels. What?
Oh, it doesn't. I don't know.
No, Among Us is a straight like. I don't want to get into what Among Us is.
Yeah, it's not
It's
even.
not. Yeah, no.
No, but I like what Dean said, because I think I wouldn't want to use this rule unless there was some sort of benefit, and I don't think there's, like, I would like to add on some sort of benefit to it.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So like, what I was getting at
Unless
what?
I'm a rom-com game, it's like what Dean said. You want some sort of, like, either hindrance or asset.
Right.
Adding
That's what I would use it for. I mean,
Yeah.
or if I was running, like, think about it, if you wanted to run a Game of Thrones style game, what was that Mr. Fisher said for politics, this would be a perfect mechanic to plug into that, because the different houses having different levels of relationship with each other, and that level of relationship would denote how loyal they are to you, how much hope you could count on, so on and so forth. It's very flexible in how it can be plugged. It can be plugged into a historical game, or so forth.
Yeah, it's really cool. And what I was getting at before when I was talking about Star Renegades, is that as you progress the levels, you actually get benefits. Like now the characters can do something better together, or like you unlock it's kind of like Chrono Trigger where you get double text. They can do a move together. So I think you mentioned something in your that's in your magic supplement where you can like do, or where do we read that? I'm all messed up now because we've been talking about a lot of stuff. Where you can like combine two abilities and like
Yeah.
into one ability. So like I can see that happening in a relationship style game where like specifically with the PCs, once they're at a high enough level with each other, they can now combine their abilities and do double text or even triple text if three of them or whatever. Like you can really play with this in a bunch of different fun ways.
All right, who
Go ahead, Al.
Oh, the next one, yeah, we can definitely. I feel like we hit on that one quite a bit. But yeah, the next one is one we're all pretty familiar with. It's the optional rule of power shifts, 292. It's the one rule that makes supers very possible in Cypher, very very fun to do. So superheroes can do things that other people cannot. They throw cars, blast through brick walls, leap onto speeding trains, and cobble together interdimensional gateways in a few hours. It's tempting to say that such characters are stronger, faster, and smarter, so they should have higher might, speed, or intellect pools. However, simply bumping up pools or edge doesn't fully represent this dramatic increase in power. Instead, consider using an optional rule called power shifts. Under this rule, all superhero characters get 5 power shifts. Power shifts are like permanent levels of effort that are always active. They don't count toward a character's maximum effort use, nor do they count as skills or assets. They simply ease tasks that fall into specific categories, which include but are not necessarily limited to the following. Accuracy. I'm not going to detail what they all do, but accuracy, dexterity, speed defense, one extra recovery roll. There's a ton of different power shifts. I'm not gonna read all of them. There's a lot, but basically the TLDR is you can make your character a lot stronger by not by bumping up the pools, but giving them basically free effort or making their skills a little bit better. And as we've all seen in practice, it works wonderfully. Like this is a rule that we could not live without for supers and for anything that has over the top action or like anime type games, even anything that has characters that are stronger than your average human or whatever, you definitely want to be running with these power shifts.
I've used power shifts in so many things. I've used it for like doing a James Bond style game, doing a Fast and Furious style game. You know, the power shifts could only be applied to specific things or reduce the number of power shifts that were given out. Power shifts are a great mechanic, makes life easy. It basically simulates, like you said, that over the top, ID. Love it. I think it's a great mechanic, and I've used it for, like I said, tons of.
Um, this is the perfect optional rule. This is if you had to define what Monica Games in the Cypher System core book tries to do with its optional rules, this is it. It's plug and play. It hits all the criteria. It's perfect for the genre that it was designed for. But not only that, it it fits into every single genre. You could it has applications into not only its setting genres. It could be applied to Numenera, the strange. It could be applied to the defined genre, the defined settings. We've used power shifts for so many different types of games and for so many different reasons. You could use power shifts to replicate force powers in Star Wars. You could use power shifts to replicate intelligent abilities for a detective story. You could use power shifts to replicate street knowledge in a 1920s gang game.
Right.
Any game where you want players to excel at an ability equally could easily be accomplished by using power shifts. You could use one power shift. You could use, if you want to play Mega Godzilla games, give everybody 8 power shifts. It's such a plug and play optional rule. It's almost perfect.
Yep. I love it. Like I said, use it for everything. It just works. And it works for those moments when you want. And I think that's the biggest thing with Cypher System. I think people, the biggest hurdle that they have is remembering that Cypher System is supposed to be about a narrative cinematic experience. So remember the movies you watch. Remember those moments in the movie when you watch your character. One of my favorite examples is John McClane. John McClane in the Die Hard movie, in the first Die Hard movie, and he's fighting the big German guy, and the guy's beating him up, or he says something to him, and the next thing you know, he gets this surge, and he's like, "I'm gonna eat you, and I'm gonna beat you." Perfect example of a power shift. He that last ditch effort. It's just one of those things that I love. Power shifts.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes without saying. I think it's probably. I know for a fact it's me and Dean's favorite optional rule. I was up there.
All right, so we're gonna move on, because we're running longer than we expected tonight. So next optional rule: normal ciphers duplicating fantastic effects. That's on page 381 of the Cypher System rulebook. If the GM and players are willing to stretch their imaginations a bit, it's possible to include some fantastic cipher effects in a game where only normal cipher effects should exist, even if the PCs are only using subtle ciphers. The players using ciphers just needs to come up with a practical, realistic explanation for how the fantastic results occur, perhaps with a much shorter or reduced effect than what's described in the cipher text. For example, a PC with a phase changer who is trapped in a prison cell could say that instead of physically phasing through the wall, using the cipher means they find a long forgotten secret door connected to a narrow hallway leading to safety. A PC with a fire detonation could say that he noticed a can of paint thinner in a room, kick it over, and throw a table lamp into the spill, creating a spark and a momentary burst of harmful flames. A PC with a monoblade could say they spot a structural flaw in an opponent's armor, allowing them to attack the rest of that combat allowing them to attack for the rest of that combat in such a way that the foe's armor doesn't count. These are interpretations of fantastic ciphers in a non-fantastic setting, requiring player ingenuity and a GM willingness to embrace creative solutions, similar to players using player intrusions to make changes in the game world. The GM always has the right to veto the explanation of the fantastic effect, allowing the player to choose a different action instead of using a fantastic cipher. This is another one of those rules that I love because it does encourage thinking outside the box. You know, we've done it in more than one game, you know, where that whole concept of thinking outside the box allows you to do something fantastical with the tools you have, you know, and I love it. I think it's great.
I would say this is the prime example of when we had this discussion on the server about why the design aesthetic of MCG of the Cypher system as a whole is, I don't want to say anti-war, but it's
anti-raw.
Like, because they go out of their way, not only in this section, but in multiple sections to say, hey, just because something is written down as is, doesn't mean that a player or a GM can embellish into the narrative to change the reality of what's written down. What's cool, you know, it's the rulings over rules philosophy. And this right there gives you the onus to say, hey, if you come up with something cool, throw it out to the GM. Because guess what? The shit might happen. You know?
Yeah. I mean, hey, we did it in your game in the box when I, you know, rode the wave with a crowbar down the side of a huge aquarium and a shark coming down after me. It was great, you know, because you think outside the box. You came up with some new way to apply whatever the cipher was or whatever the tool was that you gave us, and that's the beauty of Cypher. So yeah, I agree with you 100%.
And
you know, this rule basically says, yo, be descriptive. Be descriptive and think out of the box.
Essentially, yeah. And what Mr. Fizzer said is true. Like, I didn't even realize this was an optional rule. I thought it was just how you can use ciphers. Well, like, if you're smart enough about it, you can let it fly. Like, and I didn't realize, like, you were limited by the raw of the cipher as per, I guess, raw of Cypher System.
Right.
I always let it fly, that if the players came up with something, you know, creative, why not let it work, right? It's smart, it's cool, why not let it work in that way?
No, but you know what? It is an optional rule because there's people
Yes.
that like to play raw.
Yes. 100% makes sense to have it.
It's an optional rule because it's saying, hey, you don't need to play raw. You
Right.
know, like,
well, I think it's more so too that I think if people were just to look at this particular optional rule and embrace it a little bit, they would understand Cypher so much better. How many discussions have we had on the server and someone's going, well, the rule says this, this, and this, but I wanted to do this, and we go do it. And they're like, but it doesn't say you can do that.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Because it's not built like that. It's not about what the rules say. It's about what you and your table agree upon. You know.
Like what Mr. Frizz, raw Cypher System to me sounds like a toolbox without a carpenter.
There it is.
Pretty much.
That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. You're the carpenter. Every carpenter gets to come over and pick up whatever tool he needs. So
amazing.
go ahead, Al. Hit us up with this last one.
All right. So the last one, optional rule, modifying abilities on the fly. It's found on page 419 of the CSR. Sometimes a player can use a special ability in a way that goes beyond its normal bounds. Such changes can be done on the fly. In some cases, it simply costs more points to use the ability in a new way. In other cases, more challenges are involved. For any intellect ability with a specific range, you can increase the range by using more mental energy. If you spend one additional intellect point, you can change the range by one step, either from short to long or from long to very long. You can increase a range beyond very long, which is 500 feet or 150 meters, by spending more points. Any intellect ability that has duration, anything more than a single action in a single round, usually lasts 1 minute, 10 minutes, or 1 hour. By spending one additional point of intellect, you can increase the duration by one step. So an ability that lasts 1 minute can last 10 minutes. Durations cannot be increased by more than one step. A player can make a special roll to modify the range, area, or other aspects of an ability. The roll is always modified by the stat it's normally based on. The GM sets the difficulty for the roll based on the degree of the modification. Like any roll, the player can use effort, skill, and assets to ease the task. Generally, the difficulty falls into one of three categories from the task difficulty table. Impossible, modifying an ability to accomplish an effect that has nothing to do with its description or intent. Formidable, modifying an ability to do something to the description or intent but changing its nature. Or difficult, modifying an ability to do something within the spirit and general idea of the ability. And this one's pretty straightforward. I've been using it or been encouraging people to use it in most of my games. I always tell them, hey, if you want to use one of your abilities in a slightly different way, just let me know. If you think of something really cool to do, I'll let you say, hey, it's one EXP, or like, depending on how crazy it might be an EXP. It might just be a couple of points from their stat pool. I feel like a lot of people have been using this one or have used it even without looking at the book. If you're like a real big Cypher head and you love the whole spirit of the game, it just comes with the nature of the game. You want to kind of flex your creativity to make your abilities do something slightly different or something more out of the box than what is stated via raw. And it's something I highly encourage in all of my games.
I mean,
Again, this rule is in the spirit of what we've talked about on multiple occasions. This is the rule that basically says, you know what, well, I'm skilled in geography and I have a high intellect. I want to use my intellect score to climb that wall as opposed to using my strength. This rule basically speaks to that concept. When you decide you want to apply a different pool ability, a set of abilities or whatever, to do something else. It's the whole methodology. It's it's the nature of Cypher. It's good stuff.
I mean, to me, this isn't even an optional rule. We've been doing this since day one.
Yep.
Matter of fact, before we even knew Dean, I didn't have to explain this rule to Dean in the very first game we played together. It was almost like it was in the rule set. This is how you play the system. You know what I mean?
Right.
This
Exactly.
This is day one. I think this is actually what makes Cypher System stand out. What makes it a narrative game? What makes it fun? You know what I mean? So I couldn't imagine not using this rule.
Archer said that I used an odd example. The reason why I use that example, Archer, is because it's come up so many times on the server about applying different pools to actions. And my whole thing with that is the idea that Cypher doesn't limit you. You don't have to be limited. If you can explain a reason behind your character being able to use a different pool to do something, then why not? It's no different than a character with might defense versus a character with speed defense. Might defense basically denotes the concept that this is a character who shrugs off damage. He's a juggernaut, or he's got strong constitution and he can, weather the poison. Whereas you got a character with speed defense, this guy dodges everything. He's never being touched, But then again, you can say you can even use intellect defense. If this person wanted to dodge a physical attack using intellect defense, well, guess what? He's smart enough. Can he calculate the angle that this guy is going to shoot from? It's the concept if you wanted to create the Grammaton clerics from equilibrium, because that's what they did. They studied every gun battle and they designed the optimum angles at which gunfire was fired, giving them the preternatural ability to dodge gunfire. Boom. Just, it's how you would approach it. That's all.
Yeah, and you always have, like the rule says, you always as a GM have the option to say no. It's a give and take. It's a shared narrative. So if you feel like a player is abusing this, he's taking an ability, a skill that has no means makes sense using it. As a GM, you could always say no.
And what you call it? Yeah, you could easily say no, or you can just make the cost insane. Like, what again? What you call it? Archer said something that made me think about the cost. It said, "Yeah, I just don't require a roll with this rule." And I agree. Like, if someone comes up with something cool, it shouldn't fail because they
Right.
rolled poorly. But the like, that scale they mentioned, like the impossible, the formidable, blah blah blah, that should more dictate how much extra cost there is to do the thing, as opposed to having a role in the middle of doing that action. It kind of like gets in the way of what the players are trying to do. Just increase the cost based on those sections.
Ken,
Yeah.
Ken says he wants an episode justifying speed pool. Everyone loves might, intellect, and treats speed pool as a lesser pool. But I know y'all have some killer ideas on speed focused characters.
Oh
Oh, I have
hell
a
yeah!
couple of.
What?
I have a couple of. I think we all have a crazy speed focused character. I have a.
Easily.
I have a speed focused knife fighter. And he's sick. Just to name one. So yeah. Uh,
But
Anthony, anything else?
Yeah, so we went over all the main optional rules that are in the book. We didn't touch on the character creation optional rules because a lot of them I don't necessarily believe they're optional rules. I think that those are the steps you would take when you create a character. So I didn't really go through them in detail. I could post them in the chat on the YouTube channel for later reference or on the Discord if you want to discuss it. But the last question I'm gonna ask the audience and I'm gonna ask you guys: give me your top 3 optional rules, right? And I'll go first so you can get a basis. I'm going with my number 1 best optional rule is power shifts. My second one is modifying abilities on the fly, and my third one would be horror mode. And my honorable mention, I'll put an honorable mention in there, will probably, I'm going to pick something that I don't normally use a lot. I'm going to probably go with gaining insight because that was the one rule that I didn't really use much, but after doing this video, it makes me want to utilize it.
you want to go
Well,
deep or?
go ahead. Go ahead, Al.
No, all right. So for me, number one for me, I can't. But I know we're doing a video on just the ones from the CSR. But my number one optional rule is easily the companion mechanic from Predation. I'm just gonna say it. I'm throwing it. I know we didn't talk about it, but easily, hands down, my favorite optional rule. And then
That's why we allow it.
and then to round out the rest, I really like what you call it, modifying rules, abilities on the fly. I just love the creativity that can spark. And then relationship levels. I'm gonna throw that as my number 3 because that has inspired me to think about games that I wouldn't normally have run. So yeah, it's definitely a creativity sparker at least. And then honorable mention, for me, let me look at this list real fast. Will probably have to be, um, not horror mode for my honorable mention because it's one I love a lot and one I definitely want to use more.
And for me, of course, me and Anthony agree. Power shifts got to be at the top of my list. Number 2, honestly, I dig using miniatures, especially when I'm introducing people who come from like D&D and stuff like that. Using minis, I love using terrain. I haven't, and stuff like that. I just got to get better at it on the computer. Like Anthony, he's like the king on the computer with all of his visuals and whatnot. I'm the guy that likes to set the board up and have a nice menagerie when you walk in. And skills for backgrounds. I really dig that. I think that I've added that into my games on more than one occasion. Tell people, everybody gets 3 background skills. Just as long as they're not, combat related. I really dig that.
What's your honorable mention?
Honorable mention. My honorable mention will actually I have to go all the way to another book too, like Al did. I'm gonna go into the Stars Are Fire, and I really dig the optional rules, the red line maneuvers and stuff like that for space combat. That whole space combat thing, but red line maneuvers is actually really really cool.
Um, Mr. Fisher brought up secondary foci. That's I should have put that in the I should have put that in the optional rules thing because it was in character creation. But yeah, that's another optional rule that we use a lot. That
Secondary foci, I don't care for too much, but I do actually love double descriptors. If we want to talk about that,
we
Um,
actually let's do a video on optional rules of character creation. So,
okay.
because there actually are a lot, and actually some I really didn't know about. Like I had people make pre-gens recently for something, I forget what. Not make pre-gens, but make characters. And one of the players came up with, so I even forget what the optional role was. He's like, could I do this? And I was like, wait, you could do that? And he like, yeah, on this page and this page. I was like, what the? Yeah, so definitely a book on optional rules for character
yeah,
creation
if
would
anybody
be
in
good.
chat wants us to do a video on we'll break down all the character creation rules, optional and the ones that are raw.
Maybe
And
that'll be next week.
yeah, we could definitely do that video as well. I think that'd be a very interesting discussion.
Oh, absolutely. I think we can have a lot of fun with that.
But yeah, we can probably talk about rules and such all night.
Yeah, double descriptors are awesome. Double foci could be awesome. You know.
But one thing I will say is looking at what everyone was saying about their top three, it looks like modifying on the fly seems to be on everyone's list.
Oh yeah, modding is great. That modding on the fly is awesome.
Definitely an awesome option of rule. But yeah, I think this is a good place to call it a night, guys. It's been a blast. Anthony, I'll let you do your thing.
If you like us and you like what we do, please give us a follow on Twitch or join our Discord group. We have the largest fan run Discord group dedicated to all things Monaco games. Come join there to play in the game, talk about games. We discuss every game involved, every genre or setting that's in Monaco games, including Invisible Sun, No Thank You Evil. Join us or follow us on YouTube. Give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube. We really appreciate it if you do. Every little bit helps. Watch the videos on YouTube and subscribe. We're trying to get to 1,000 subs there. Any little help we'll greatly appreciate it. Visit our merch store. Get the cool Cipher Unlimited swag that me and Dean got on. Like we said, our videos are always free, but every little bit helps. Go to our Ko-fi, give us a little Ko-fi donation. Like I said, we'll love you if you do or do not do it. But if you choose to do it, hey, we love you too. And last but not least, we love you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for spending, your Wednesday evening with us, and we'll see you next week with I guess those player options.
And
Actually, we might have an interview that I'm setting up now. If it happens, I'll we'll let you know.
We'll make an adjustment. But at this point, it is what it is.
yeah, and thank you guys so much for stopping by. This was an excellent talk. I'm looking forward to seeing those relationship rules, Archer, that you said you've come up with or that you've written down. If you're gonna post them on a Discord server, please tag me. I want to see that stuff.
Absolutely.
But yeah, as usual, thank you guys so much for stopping by. And from us at the CU, we will see you later.